Hi, and welcome to Voices from the Left. I'm your host, Kraig. Thanks for listening. Our quote today: "The rich rob the poor, and the poor rob one another." Sojourner Truth. This episode, my guest is Lilith, the secretary of the Wisconsin chapter of the John Brown Gun Club. We'll be chatting about community defense and monitoring threats from fascist groups in the area, among other things. Hi, Lilith. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. So will you please tell me about yourself and your background?
Yeah. My name's Lilith Kievskaya. Um, I was born in Southern Illinois, moved up here with my fiance for schooling, and we ended up staying. Um, so pronouns are she, her. Um, I started doing activism, I'd say a little bit after, no, right before, around the time of the Roe v. Wade leak. I went headfirst into the leftist activism, no prior history. And that's basically me on a career wise. I grew up sort of with this sense of duty. My So I'll just put this out there because I don't know how to work it in. When I was quite young, I had an incident happen with a family member. And since then, I've kind of had a sense of duty. And throughout my whole life, I've been wanting to help people. However, because of the environment I was raised in, I was not raised in an environment that taught me to help people the right way. I was in a very, you know, pro law enforcement house. And I grew up, having that dream. So when I graduated high school, I did a lot of security work. I was an alarm response officer, which was burglary alarms and stuff. Worked for various companies. And I started to go from conservative to liberal. And that was until I got employment by the state. I worked at Columbia Correctional Institution as a correctional officer. And there I have quite a few stories to tell, but I ended up resigning, and it was about a year later that I really started becoming a radicalized communist. And it was circa, I think it was 2021, that I started theorizing this project I'm working on, which is the John Brown Gun Club of Wisconsin, because it was around this time I started coming out as trans. And that really changes you, especially when coming from a position of like straight white privilege.
Hmm,
It really
sure.
helps you see the world differently. And so I started thinking, like, especially after January 6th, I just saw that there's a lot of people that there's a lot of psychopaths that want innocent people dead for no reason. And I figured, come societal collapse, come revolution, come civil war, whatever happens, we are outnumbered and outgunned. There are people that have been told that we're coming for their kids by virtue of being trans and all that shit.
Yeah.
And what I came to realize is we're not going to have a brighter future if we don't fight for it. So I started the Still Project, um, and um, we've been going up from there. So that's basically my personal history.
All right. Um, so let's get into I guess, more the details of the club itself. So, well, we
Mhm.
start with the namesake. So, who is
Yeah.
John Brown?
So John Brown is a radical anti-slavery abolitionist. I believe he was born in 1800. His birthday was just a couple days ago on May 9th. Basically, John Brown is an excellent example of when resisting the status quo is necessary because he did the right thing when basically nobody was behind him, um, besides his little crew, until the Civil War occurred, and then they started viewing him as a hero because the government said, "Okay, you can view him as a hero now," but he fought and he gave his life for the rights of others before that acknowledgement. He did the right thing before it was cool.
Right.
And yeah, so the whole movement's named after him for that cause, for that reason.
Excellent. If someone wanted to learn more about John Brown himself, where would they start?
So a few great resources. I know there's plenty of books out there that are quite reputable regarding him. I know one of my introductions to the topic was from YouTube. It was Extra History on YouTube, and they have like a series, like an animated history of everything he did. That's a nice, convenient way to start. Um, and of course, Wikipedia is always a good starter for any topic.
Sure. All right. And I will I'll grab the link for listeners if for the extra history series, and that will be in the show notes for people too. So
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's quite digestible, especially for new people learning about them.
excellent. All right. So what is the John Brown Gun Club?
So the John Brown Gun Club is a national movement. It's quite a decentralized movement, but it's basically leftist ideologies, anti-capitalist, anti-fascist, that sort of thing. And there's branches everywhere. However, due to the decentralized nature, not all branches are identical. There's
Hmm.
so many things that can change them. For example, our branch in Wisconsin, we are guided by communist ideology. Whereas, some other branches might just be like anarchist or whatever, despite us having non-sectarian membership, at least my branch. So a lot of the things that the John Brown Gun Club movement was kind of founded upon was one, a big thing that we're kind of known for is community defense. So that means, organizing our communities to, protect themselves. Because especially now they can't they can't trust law enforcement. You can only really trust your own communities.
Yeah. We've seen just systematic oppression by law enforcement, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Just pretty
exactly.
much around the globe. But
Yeah,
but it's any protest now is gonna have the police show up and crack skulls. It's just how it
yeah,
is.
yeah,
The First Amendment
exactly.
just doesn't really exist anymore unless you're rich.
Exactly. They are guard dogs for the rich. And
Totally.
I think that was kind of part of like when I was in corrections, I remembered the type of people that stood beside me.
Hmm.
The inmates liked me better than all my coworkers for a reason.
Yeah, makes
Um,
sense.
and like I ultimately resigned not just due to the horrible conditions, but because I did not feel comfortable with my coworkers.
Hmm.
The inmates would like me, my coworkers, I would hate their guts. But I remember, the shit they said about inmates and kind of how they viewed them as less than human. And yeah, I can say that when it comes to people in law enforcement, you aren't attracting the people that law enforcement tries to claim that they have among them.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a grift, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
this is who we want, this is who we are, but in
yeah,
reality they're not. Nothing that they do gets those people.
yeah. I remember in the academy, they taught me, that we're not here to punish these guys. These are just, human beings like us and they deserve fair treatment. The motto was firm, fair, and consistent. However, out of everyone I met while in corrections, I was the only one that believed that.
Sure. Well, and you in a lot of places I know that the law enforcement agencies will bring in like outside consultants to give
Hmm.
to give like training, warrior training, quote unquote.
Yeah,
Like they're teaching them to be militant towards
yeah,
the people that they're supposed to be protecting, right?
yeah,
They're giving them the opposite training of what they need to actually be public servants, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
It kind of goes into environmental conditions because, like, you put them in these conditions that kind of breeds, resistance, and then they train us to be scared. It's not a good
Jesus.
loop.
Sure, sure. So you mentioned there are other branches in the United States. Do you have
Yeah.
like even a soft number of how many there are around the
Oh
states?
boy. I mean, on our website, I have compiled, which is johnbrowngunclub.org, separated by dashes. I have compiled all of them that I have found. Of course, it's hard to keep track of because of the decentralized nature. 8,
Sure.
9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33 we are keeping track of, including ourselves.
Gotcha.
And,
Gotcha.
some of them might be defunct and we don't know about it. Some of them, there might be some that exist that
Sure.
we don't know about.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Gotcha. I think when I was looking earlier, or I guess it would have been in April at this point. There are several in Texas, I think,
Oh, yeah.
which which is which is interesting because like Texas was the last state to free its slaves, right? So the fact that there's multiple branches, or at least at
yeah.
one time were multiple branches of of an abolitionist gun club it was pretty wild to me.
Yeah, I'm seeing 7 of them. And again, I'm not sure if any of these are inactive, but there was one in Austin, Dallas, Elm Fork, which is the one we actually communicated with prior to
Hmm.
joining the John Brown Gun Club movement, Fort Worth, Johnson County, presumed border region, and San Antonio.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, Texas is a huge state by landmass
Yeah,
anyway, so it makes sense that there would be more than one there. But yeah,
yeah, I'm
still
glad
kind of
we have that
wild
coverage.
for sure. Um,
Yeah.
One thing I didn't notice is if there were any international chapters. Are there
Oh, so
any?
that's a great question. Um, None that I know about. John Brown is an American figure, so he gets a lot of attention here. However, there is nothing really stopping that from occurring. In fact, I
Hmm,
encourage it. It's
sure,
a gun club, so of course that's a bit of a prerequisite, but not even because, like,
sure,
even if you live somewhere where you can't uh, own guns and express that right, you can still join the movement in other ways and help in other ways. Take our branch, for example. We're doing all sorts of things that don't revolve around guns to help. It's
sure,
it's really about getting organized and resisting.
sure, sure. All right. So I guess in general, we've talked about it a little bit, but do you have, is there like a mission statement or vision of the club itself, like a formalized version?
Yeah, yeah, we do have a mission statement. Um, right now we're working on a handbook which will contain it, but it's basically a page long. However, there is a section of the handbook that basically describes exactly what we do. Would you like me to pull that up real quick?
Sure. You don't necessarily have to read the whole thing, but if there's
Oh, yeah, yeah.
some highlights you want to
Yeah,
give
yeah,
from it, that'd be great.
absolutely. So we kind of separated our role into 3 main missions. Scrolling down. Yeah, I've been working on this for a while. Here we go. So, the first thing we do is we want to advocate for arming and organizing marginalized communities. We want to we want to establish mutual aid programs, and we want to spread class consciousness. And those are kind of like the three main missions of our specific branch. So you have the more armed aspect of things. You have the setting up the organizational structures to maintain self-reliance. And you also have, spreading class consciousness to kind of tighten things together. Because you can't really have, our ultimate goal is to help make our country better for a leftist revolution to occur. And we can't really do that without spreading class consciousness and advocating for the people that capitalism oppresses.
Right. Yeah. One thing I've seen that's become, I mean, I've always known it just being an observer of things, but like one thing, especially since COVID started,
Mm-hmm.
there's been growing class consciousness since then, but
Yeah.
it still seems to need to have to go such a long way in some cases, right?
Yeah.
Because it's, you know, it's the internet and especially social media, which is terrible for the most part. But like you see so many people on there just like defending low wages and defend like who are obviously not business owners, who are obviously not part of the capitalist class. You know, the capitalist class isn't spending time on TikTok. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
that's people outside the capitalist class doing that and
Yeah.
commenting on stuff. And it's like, yeah, just a tiny bit of class consciousness for some of these people would go such a long way into helping, you know, even just get different laws passed, right? Or different
Yeah.
city policies in some cases passed, right? Where they're just hyper focused on, creating jobs, job creation, job, economy. And it's like, guys, none of that shit matters.
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
if if no one can, if everyone's excess labor value is being stolen,
Yeah.
right? Like,
If you can't even provide the bare necessities, like that reminds me of a quote I saw, going around online, and it's act your wage.
oh yeah, I
Like,
like that.
yeah, yeah. It's the cultural hegemony of the bourgeoisie. Like by controlling, how we grew up and the media on TV, education, and who can get it,
Right.
they are really good at pulling our strings and making us believe that their ideology is ours. And it's really, as someone who has participated in so many arguments, I can tell you that we have some absolute brain deadery going on here.
Totally.
And it cycles to like a big part of like things I say is that you can't do diplomacy while someone's hovering a knife over your head. And I think,
Right. Right.
yeah, that's the
Yeah.
important thing that I want people to understand, because these people are like bigots and stuff like that that believe we're coming for their kids.
Right.
We can't negotiate with them. As much as the liberals would love us to talk to them, we cannot talk to them as they're trying to plunge a dagger in our throat.
Right. That's
Whether
not
the
the time.
violence, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
the violence can be physical or legislative. It doesn't matter. You can't be like, hey, let's sit down, let's talk about this factually. Because the thing is, when you play off of the everyday biases of people, demagogic propaganda and the such, and fascism is inherently irrational.
Right.
To the listeners, a good source to learn about that is Jason Stanley's How Fascism Works. I
Mm.
mean, it just unfortunately doesn't work. You kind of result in, situations like the John Brown Gun Club where we are militant, and we're militant because we have no other choice.
Right. Right. For sure. Um, all right. So you mentioned it earlier. Do you have anything to add to how the Wisconsin chapter itself came into being or
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So come January 6th, it really knocked me up and be like, okay, I should really start, I want to see something like this happen. And it turns out there's no John Brown Gun Club in my area. The Socialist Rifle Association doesn't do anything like this. Um, so I made my own. And what really got theory into practice, what really made me exercise my praxis is come the Roe v. Wade leak, I'm like, I sat through the entire Trump presidency and did nothing but bitch online.
Right.
And I felt ashamed. So when Roe v. Wade happened, like, of course, people get a little, whenever a Democrat president gets in, they do the Democrat thing of being the pacifying fangs of fascism, and everyone lets their guards down.
Yep.
No more word about the ICE concentration camps. No,
Right.
that's fine if there's a Democrat in power. Cracking down on our workers' rights, it's okay because he's a Democrat, with the railway strike.
Right.
Um, and it was this point where I was like, fuck it. So for the first time, I got my gear, I strapped in, and I started spreading out flyers and I started attending protests.
Mm.
I was far from ideologically where I am now. I still had like a developing, like I was somewhere between progressive and um, Marxist. I wasn't quite there yet. Um, but I went out there and I'm glad I did. I'm glad I got things started. And turns out going out in public with a kit and a rifle and a beret and people notice you.
Yeah, for sure.
And like it wasn't even to any of my own merit. It was just because, someone was willing to strap up and, defend abortion rights or something like that. And I got into like more than like 10 news articles.
Mm.
Um, a lot of them were repeats though, which was kind of surprising to see like big name companies just copying and pasting different
Sure.
news articles.
Sure.
Um, but I remember two people at least reached out to me on my personal Facebook page, as a result of me being in those articles. And they were both supportive. And one of them was even a conservative, which is nice, that I can get that, across ideological lines.
Right.
It's nice to meet them when they, truly believe they're doing a good thing, because
Sure.
then that means they're changeable.
Right.
But it still scared the hell out of me
Mm. Sure.
because I was a nobody. I was just a person fighting for a cause. And I went on a hiatus for a while, while I recuperated and kind of like calmed down from that shock. And then I came back and it was around that time that we, you know, went with the John Brown Gun Club movement. That's kind of when I reached out to Elm Fork and, we started getting things started.
Excellent. Excellent. So what are some of the organization's current activities? You mentioned
Beautiful.
community, yeah, you mentioned community defense earlier, but I know you've got some other
Yeah.
stuff you guys are working on too.
Yeah. So in terms of just pure activities, there's three things. We have two operations going, and that's Operation River Sea, which is our advocacy plan to basically spread awareness for the Israeli genocide of Palestine.
Okay.
So right now, that's one thing we're doing. Another is our medical initiative, which I think is something no other John Brown Gun Club has done, maybe, at least not to this extent. And the goal of this operation, our medical initiative, is to one, get a core of medics that are willing to volunteer during times of civil unrest, to protect our communities. And two, to eventually have the means to train our communities, provide free training for medical, like first aid and stuff like that,
Okay.
so they can provide for themselves.
Sure.
And this has been quite successful so far. It's been our most successful initiative. I'm really proud of it. Right now, we only have it's just me and one other who's certified as a medic. However, we also have a medical instructor
Okay.
and some people who are interested. So we're like halfway to our goal. Another really cool thing that we've done that I'm pretty sure no other John Brown gun clubs have done is we've launched an intelligence initiative. And
Hmm.
basically what that is so recently there are Nazis in Madison. Not too recently, but I saw it coming. I
Sure.
saw it coming because I saw their activities in Watertown.
Okay.
Um, and I felt when they came to Madison, I'm like, never again. Like I felt personally responsible as the secretary of the John Brown Gun Club for not being able to at least be there.
Hmm.
So I started the intelligence initiative, and basically what it is we use legal information through OSINT, legally obtainable information, to keep track of organization hate groups. We call them fascist threat groups.
Okay.
We keep files on them and we try to monitor them.
Hmm.
Now, we only have at this time one person in our intelligence analyst role, and they're doing a great job. Um, and of course, we're always limited by our manpower. Like, we can do so much more if we get the manpower for it. Right now, I think we got like 7 members including me. I think that goes up to 9, 10 if you include external advisors and liaisons to other organizations. Um, but um, right now we're monitoring some of those, and our ideal is that we'll be able to predict and act before they come marching downtown or something with their swastikas again, because
Sure.
as much as the liberals will tell you to just ignore them because they absolutely love when we ignore things getting worse.
Right.
um no, I want to send the message that Madison is not welcoming to hate.
Right. Well, and it's such like a fully mask off moment when you see hate groups, specifically, neo-Nazi groups, marching unmolested down wherever they go, right? And
Yeah,
then you have a few hundred people show up to, protest a genocide.
yeah.
And, you know, of course that's the immediate thing they're protesting,
Mhm.
right? But the larger part of that is settler colonialism, right?
Yeah.
And capitalism. And so
Hmm.
what do both sides, the Democrats and the Republicans, do? As soon as something happens that threatens capital, they fucking send out the goddamn police to crack skulls
Yeah, they send out
every
their
every
dogs.
single time. So it's like it's all perfectly fine if Nazis parade around town, that cops don't even show up, right? But as soon as someone, says anything, that goes against the status quo of the capitalist
Private property
exploitation,
and
yeah,
yeah.
private property, right? Yeah, it's just ridiculous. Mask off. They care more about property damage than human beings.
Yeah, we actually had an event relatively recently. Gays Against Groomers is a hate group.
Hmm.
I think it's on a national level. And they were planning to be in Wisconsin, and they were at the Capitol. But it was actually one of the moments that I realized that, how we plan to counter these groups is really working is there was a sizable counter protest.
Okay.
And myself and another John Brown Gun Club member were a part of it. The police thought I was leading it, which, yeah. Um, but one of the protesters told me that they were only there because they heard the media that we put out to get counter protesters in,
Awesome.
because that's our first step is we do not have the manpower ourselves to respond to these things with such small numbers because not everyone's going to be available. So we always want to try and coordinate with the public to get as much support as possible to resist, these threats to our community. And while we were doing that, like we saw, uh, they really showed their true colors, but we saw their smiles turn to frowns. We really fucked with them. We did a good job at disrupting that event.
Awesome.
But also the police really showed that uh, straight up like denial that
Right.
they were a very like bigoted organization. Like they didn't care. They just cared that, as long as things were kept civil,
Yeah.
like they're legislatively trying to kill us while, not that hate speech isn't too veiled, but they were still out there, like pretending to be some arbiters of justice, standing in between us and them. The Yeah, it was ridiculous.
It's crazy. The tools of
Yeah,
capital telling you that, everything's fine.
yeah, yeah.
Fuck off.
Everything's fine. You're overreacting. I
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
I have a water bottle that says the road to fascism is paved with people telling you you're overreacting.
Over totally. Yeah. It is
Yeah,
100%. That's true. Totally
and it's
is.
always the people who have like who would benefit from it.
Of course.
It's never the people that like are being damaged by it.
Right. Yeah. It's insanity.
Yeah.
Insanity. Oh. Any other oh, I know. I had another question. To go back to what you said about your medical initiative.
Uh-huh.
I wanted to just, I think, clarify a little bit for not only for myself, but for anybody listening
Mhm.
that might not be familiar. Um, you're you're talking more about getting quote unquote street medics trained,
Yeah.
right? That's, I think, a common vernacular people might start seeing
Yeah.
on social media now is street medics, right? So,
Hmm.
um, can you talk a little bit about what, obviously if someone's, needs help, first aid because they have a cut or, got
Hmm.
beat the hell up or what, some obvious
Yeah.
trauma, like what are
Yeah.
some of the other things that the medics might be doing?
Oh, so what made me start this initiative is I knew a street medic that was active during the Rodney, not
George
I'm
Floyd?
I'm forgetting I'm forgetting the name of the gentleman that died after his neck was kneeled upon.
George Floyd?
George Floyd. Yeah, 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 yeah. During the George Floyd unrest in Madison, I had someone who was a street medic who helped us out in our early stages. Unfortunately, they turned out to be a Zionist, so we cut ties.
Ugh.
Uh,
Oh.
yeah, yeah, unfortunate. But they um, they unfortunately learned what it means uh, when you get home and realize that you either lost someone or you saved someone's life.
Hmm.
So some of the things to address the actual question, we started this. One, there's chemical agents. Being a correctional officer, I was our former correctional officer. I was trained in chemical agents.
So,
Um, I was exposed to them 3 times in training. I was familiarized with their use, and I was exposed to them on one occasion while I was responding to a prison fight.
mm,
Um, and so one thing the street medics do is they respond to people who are affected by chemical agents.
gotcha.
They might, you know, get that pepper spray off. Usually they'll use water or some other liquid. However, I've been trained, I do not suggest that because when they sprayed us in the academy, they said, none of that works. Here's what you need to do. They took us out and they said, all you have to do is keep blinking. And it's really hard to keep blinking initially because of the involuntary eye closure. Keep blinking and fresh air and dab it with a paper towel and
Hmm.
just keep replacing the paper towel and that alone will clear you of pepper spray. You can be
Hmm.
clear in like 5 minutes tops. No,
Hmm.
5 minutes minimum of pepper spray. If you do that, of course, there's still going to be residual effects. Like it basically feels like you have a really bad sunburn for the rest of the day,
Oof.
especially depending upon the agent used.
Gotcha. So
So that's
it's
one thing they could do.
okay.
Another thing they could do is escort individuals out of conflict areas.
Hmm.
Um, and they could also ensure the safety of these individuals in that way, especially if they double as our riflemen, in which case doubly so for getting people to safety.
Sure.
I think yeah, we have doubled up riflemen and medics in our branch.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, and it, you know, obviously before 2020, I'd seen protests before.
Hmm.
I was still, how old was I in 90 for Rodney King? That was early 90s, right? The Rodney King riots.
I think so. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I was like 12, maybe 13. So,
Yeah.
like, not really any awareness of, like, I understood it was happening, right?
Uh-huh.
And I understood on the surface why it was happening, but other than that, I had no awareness at all, right? At that age, especially growing up, you know, in Wisconsin where I did it, was we were totally removed from it, especially back then with no social media. So I
Yeah.
didn't really get a good dose of just what it was like for what was happening during protests that turned
Hmm.
violent because the police showed up, right? Or because other other right wing Nazi groups besides the police show up, right?
Agitated.
Yeah. So that happened during 2020, of course, right? I was
Yeah.
lucky enough to be able to continue working through 2020, unlike many other people. Um, but I still got to witness it firsthand on my phone, right?
Hmm.
And I think that might have been that way for a lot of people, especially people maybe well, I'll say my age, just because not a lot of unrest that happened, before that, we just didn't have the coverage that we do now, right?
Yeah, yeah, like kind of what's going on with Palestine. Like
Right,
a lot of people are supporting Palestine, rightfully so, because they're seeing what's actually happened as opposed to what's being told to them.
right.
Um, I know, like, I wasn't even born when the Rodney King incident happened. I'm
Hmm.
26, so I'm
Gotcha.
quite young. Um, However, for me, the early thing was the Ferguson riots.
Sure.
Um, Growing up in Southern Illinois, I wasn't too far from Ferguson,
Okay.
on the other side of the Mississippi. And I remember in high school, uh, like black students would yell, "Hands up, don't shoot," and white hall monitors will yell back, "Pants up, don't loot." And thinking back, that was quite fucked up. But
Yeah.
like, that was before I was politically conscious. I didn't really think anything of it. But then like growing up, in a white family that, isn't intelligent in the least bit. Sorry for dogging on my family. They are not a group of intelligent individuals,
Oh, bummer.
outside of my sister's immediate family. But it was, I remember that racism was like there. Like they were like, don't don't be racist. Racist is bad, but at the same time, there are those nudge nudge incidents of like he was black, nudge nudge, and then like with the cultural hegemony, like you believe that like these riots are like unfounded or they're just overreacting or maybe they just want to root and all these other racist explanations in order to downplay the severity of what they're experiencing and we weren't.
Right.
And I think that's probably like part of my animosity towards bigots is realizing that I was able to get out of that young, but they'll be like 30 years old and still functioning off of these racist
Mm,
stereotypes. It's
right.
kind of like, as a side note, capitalism is inherently racist in this way too, because
Yep.
of the myth of personal merit.
Right.
You put these marginalized communities in horrible conditions and work against them and then blame them for not being able to become CEOs.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. You put
Yeah,
it, you have
it's
a,
fun.
it's totally fucked up because you had, the hardcore original slavery ended, right?
Yeah,
That was replaced by the
wage
Reconstruction.
slavery.
Yeah, well, not only that, but the
Hmm.
Reconstruction amendments were not as helpful as they could have been, right? Or
Yeah.
as they should have been, right? And then because of that, you had Jim Crow laws
Hmm.
replace actual slavery, right?
Yeah.
And then that's morphed in, you had wage slavery happening that whole time outside of regular slavery, right? But then
Hmm.
it just compounded itself, right? So,
Yeah.
and now it's the prison population, right?
Yeah.
That has picked up the mantle from where Jim Crow technically ended, quote unquote, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so your point about that is spot on. It's not it's always been that way, right?
Yeah.
And it's just changes, the form of oppression just changes a little tiny bit to whatever it needs to be, to keep furthering capital, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I know like segregation even still exists to like degrees, like in the form they just changed the wording from like black
Right,
families can only live here versus, single family apartments.
right.
They'll just
Yeah,
change the wording and still, be like, okay, but you guys can only live here. And
right.
then I read this really good book called Poverty by America.
Mm,
I forgot the actual author, but it really explains how poor people are screwed over in this country. And essentially, like, and I've spoken with members of these communities, and they've agreed that this is their experience, is that you have all these businesses surrounding poor communities that take advantage of them. Because when a poor family needs a service, they've probably waited because they don't have money, which means it's more of an emergency.
sure,
So then these businesses around them charge them a ton of money. And like you have to go to like white neighborhoods to get a decent price.
sure. Yeah.
And it's
Ugh,
not, and then, us white people trying are just any apologist for capitalism will be like, you're just making bad financial choices.
right. Yeah. Yeah. As if there haven't been 200 years of systemic oppression built into the system.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite insane. And it's that we as the American people are so I feel like white people in particular, we were taught that, everyone on TV looks like us for the most part. Everyone that runs the government looks like us.
Yep.
So when, we feel so entitled to like having like we think our opinions matter more than opinions of experts on these topics who spent so much time like researching it. We
Sure.
feel so entitled to put our opinions out there without any knowledge. And I feel like that's why like there's so many of these bigot opinions, so many fascist, and fascism looks really attractive to the politically illiterate. That's the thing.
Sure.
It's it spawns them really easily.
Yeah, for sure. Um, to your point about uh, the changing the names of things so that so it's not called segregation anymore. Um, in April, we just had the primary here in Wisconsin. Um,
Yeah.
one of the county supervisor seats, in the district I'm in, was up
Uh-huh.
was up for election, and I went on the guy's website. He's from Marshall, so not too far out. It's in Dane County, obviously, but not too far
Okay.
outside. Madison, and
Mm-hmm.
all these people that were like vouching for him and sponsoring him and saying vote for this guy. The words that a lot of them used were, he shares our rural values. That's just a dog whistle. right?
It is.
For he's white like I am,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's what that means, right? And
Hmm.
it's like I was just like, come on, man. Like
Did
that's
you hear about I think this was a few years ago, Republicans, I think in Wisconsin, or it might have been national thing, made Democratic black candidates blacker on their ads.
I think I did hear about that. Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it can't get more obvious. Like,
Yeah.
how are you the good guys?
Yeah. They never have been.
No.
No. God. Yeah. That's just insanity. Just awful. Just
Yeah, it's
fuckers.
shocking.
It, 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 it's shocking in its audacity, but it's also like, God damn it, they're doing that again. It's just, they
Yeah.
just recycle the shit every time into some other unbelievably absurd thing. It's just like,
Yeah.
come on. Oh,
It's easy to recycle when your demographic is reactionaries who don't really have much media or political literacy.
right. 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
They
Oh my
just
goodness.
see article and it make them mad.
Right. Right. Yeah. Oh my goodness. All right. So if someone wanted to volunteer for the organization, what might that look like?
Oh, so like, are you asking what they do?
Yeah.
Oh, so we have tons of positions. This is also something I feel like we've done that other John Brown gun clubs haven't done is we've really like made a list of roles and responsibilities and given them titles. We're quite organized in this way. Um, centralization versus decentralization. And like generally movements like ours are decentralized because there's a tactical advantage to that, but there's also risk.
Sure.
I had someone message me telling me about how a movement similar to ours was destroyed on the basis of being decentralized because that means people, intruders, grifters can come in and
Sure.
they have a lot bigger of a say because the organization is decentralized and then they destroy the movement.
Mm,
Um, of course, there's also a legal risk to centralization like we're doing, and we mitigate that by one, uh, we still adhere to operational security wherever we can, and two, we're an above ground organization. So we don't really, actually do anything to be too scared of law enforcement.
sure.
Um, that doesn't mean they won't target us for whatever reason,
Right.
but
Yeah.
it means we're not going out of our way to piss them off.
Right. Right. Right.
Um, so we have a bunch of roles. We separate these roles in divisions. We're working on this right now. The first up is the advisory division, the advisory council, and basically these are advisors. One thing we really love is ideological custodians. So people who
Okay.
are really good in Marxist ideologies, Marxist-Leninism, all sorts of communist ideologies. We want them in this role because I am not a perfect communist. I want to make sure the things we do adhere to our ideology.
Sure.
And for ideological custodians, they're a valued advisor because, uh, you know, the opinions of people who aren't one with you aren't as useful as the ones who know what you're trying to do.
Sure. Makes sense. Yeah.
We also have the advocacy corps, advocacy brigade. They are basically all things propaganda. So that's educational campaigns, counter misinformation campaigns, um, and spreading awareness for social issues. That's what Operation River Sea is under. Following that, we have the Defense Brigade. That's our boots on the ground. That's our armed demonstrators, our riflemen, and hopefully in the future, our Minutemen. We want to set up programs with marginalized communities and religious institutions and anyone that might be under the threat of fascism. We want to establish emergency plans with them
Okay.
to be able to help them whenever they're under threat.
Gotcha.
Um, Following that, we have our newest medical brigade. That's, of course, training street medics. That's furthering our medical initiative of trying to gain instructors and things of that sort.
Sure.
We have a really cool person who's the instructor of our medics. He's very he works in the field. I he So yeah, and then we have our reconnaissance division. We've kind of been changing the name of it a little bit, but basically what our reconnaissance division is it's a whole division made upon trying to basically our intelligence. It's trying to use publicly available legal information and stockpile it regarding fascist threat groups. It's people not just monitoring these groups, but also people who might look at locations that we plan on going before we go to identify anything we might need to know about before we get there.
Makes sense.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. And in terms of roles, like there's so many more roles that are named. Like we need someone public affairs, we need social media managers, we need all sorts of things. But that's just, naming some of it. You can find
Sure.
a lot of it on our website.
Gotcha.
And when our handbook comes out and it'll be published on our website, that will be kind of the end all be all for all of our roles. And that's
Hmm.
going to come out soon, hopefully.
Excellent. So just to give an example of what I think you mean when you're talking about monitoring fascist
Hmm.
threat groups. So
Yeah.
people, I'm sure some of the listeners, and I know you probably do too, remember the group of fascists that had plotted to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
I think I remember that. Yeah.
And I don't remember what, if they were part of a specific, like the Proud Boys or anything like that or not.
Hmm.
But those are the types of groups I presume that you're talking about trying to monitor, if you're aware of their existence at least.
Yeah. Yeah. We can if we can. Of course, manpower limits how many people we can keep an eye on. So we
Sure.
have to be really selective right now because we don't have the manpower. That being said, if we are made aware and if we know of a group, they are on our list.
Gotcha.
Even if we don't have someone dedicated to them right now, the only thing stopping that monitoring is the manpower to do it.
Gotcha. Gotcha. All right. Um, so if someone wanted to become a member, is there an official process for that?
Yeah, yeah. So basically, first thing is, of course, you want to review the website. You want to get to know who we are. You'll want to, be like, okay, this is something I want to do. And this is a new thing, is I want you to wait 3 days. I want you to wait a couple days. I want you to wait 3 days, make sure it's just not spontaneity.
Sure.
Because it's good to play off spontaneity, but as a movement, we can't rely on spontaneity alone. We have to be architects. We can't
Sure.
just be a force of reaction. We have to be actively building. So,
Gotcha.
like, one of the things I dislike is, when someone's like, oh, I'm gung ho, and then tomorrow they're like, actually, no, I don't want to do it. So, wait 3 days,
Sure.
wait 3 days before reaching out to us, and then basically, what will happen is the recruiter, which will probably be me, will talk to you online. And we are accepting international volunteers as well for at-home positions.
Hmm.
But if you're a local volunteer, we will set up an in-person interview. Um, and from that interview, if everything seems good, if deemed necessary, we'll also do a OSINT background check just to make sure that we do our due diligence to I think if you're released from prison, you should have all your rights intact. But legally, we got to do our due diligence to make sure we don't accidentally give a gun to someone the feds are going to bust us all for giving a gun.
Right, because they're a felon.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, a convicted
So,
felon. Sorry.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So we allow felons to join, but of course, there's those guidelines that, they can't come
yeah,
in contact with a firearm. It has to be an unarmed position.
sure, makes sense.
Um, yeah. So after that, um, at the spot, it'll probably be fine. I'll be like, all right, yeah, that's everything for me. You've answered all my questions. I have some questions that I ask them, get to know them, like what their motivations are, what they want to do, things like that. And then I'll be like, all right, I'll give you some time to think about it. Or, if they're really wanting to do it, they can accept the offer right there. But in general, I can give them some time to think it over before they give their final decision.
Sure.
Um, and from that moment, once they accept, uh, they'll then get trained on whatever role they wanted to do. They'll receive some briefings and they'll be given our handbook.
Excellent. Excellent. So, um, one thing I I want to talk about, you mentioned it earlier,
Hmm.
and then you also talked just now about doing an OSINT check on a
Yeah,
prospective member.
yeah.
I just kind of want to clarify for people that might be listening, thinking like, "What the hell are they talking about? They're going to background check me to be in an org." So, what one reason why I think that's important that you're doing that is because of COINTELPRO, right?
Hmm.
And the other like counter, uh, the anti-communist propaganda
Hmm.
arm of the CIA, the FBI, the NSA,
Yeah.
whatever other alphabet agency you can come up with that spent time in the 30s and 40s and 50s in the United States specifically, um,
Hmm.
like pretty much overtly back then, like joining the Communist Party, the Socialist parties, and intentionally destroying those organizations from the inside, right?
Yeah.
And so that you like I said, you mentioned it a little bit earlier about
Hmm.
organizations being ruined from the inside, but that to me that's the reason why you need to do exactly what you described, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's yeah, we want to do our due diligence to make sure this organization remains safe. And one of the things regarding to that is like we understand that operational security is important, and the biggest concern is the safety of my members for me.
Sure.
And we take extra steps to where um, once you are in, you can choose to go by a moniker.
Hmm.
And what that means is we get rid of your legal name.
Gotcha.
Uh, we we will not introduce each other by any names that we have not given express permission to do so.
Okay.
We have members that go by monikers, and if they want to give their real names, if they feel safe doing that, they can. But that is one of the extra ways that we take, in which case to make our members feel safe
Gotcha.
and so that they are safe. So that's
Sure.
another way we kind of deal with that. But also, yeah, I didn't mention this, but when you look through our website, you'll see requirements to join. Of course, 18 plus generally. There's some firearms, weird stuff with that, but you can possess a firearm at 18. And then again, unarmed positions. So 18 plus at least. You have to be willing to adhere to other rules and regulations, which nothing unreasonable, just some basic stuff. Um, and the thing that I want to bring up is conflicts of interest. And that's something that we say that they have to bring up. Like, for example, like um, if they have a family member in a hate group, if they worked for the state, um, we want them to let us know anything that's not going to look good if we find it out ourselves.
Sure.
Um, like myself, coming from law enforcement, from a correctional position. Like I know that a lot of communists, like a lot of us were raised fascist. A lot of
Right.
us were raised in conditions we were not proud of. I know people are capable of change, but I also want to, if something seems fishy, I want to be able to spot it before it becomes an issue.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. 100%.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about or discuss? Something we haven't talked about yet at all, or um, maybe something you and I may have talked about last week and I forgot to bring up.
Yeah, so I actually want to address the listener. Um, so this is a message to every would-be revolutionary. Whether you're a communist or a shade of leftist, we are outnumbered and gunned by psychopaths that believe it moral to slaughter your family and friends if they were given the opportunity. As we near collapse or civil war or what have you, it is each of our duties to arm and organize. Because if we do not, genocide will be the result. These words are harsh, and I am sure it is not what you want to hear, but this is the very real reality we're facing. If we do not act now, it will, and I repeat, it will be too late when the United States is occupied by a series of militias that believe you are coming after their families to transify their kids, are to blackify history or whatever. They believe your equal rights to be an attack upon them. And they will respond aggressively in tune. I am proof that you can start by yourself and grow a group that is capable of not only resisting, but affecting positive change in our communities. Join the fight. And I would like to end it on a quote from Che Guevara. The example of a revolution and the lessons it applies for Latin America have destroyed all coffeehouse theories. We have demonstrated that a small group of men, supported by the people, without fear of dying, can overcome a disciplined regular army and defeat it. And one more, because this one touches me. I don't think you and I are very closely related. However, if you are capable of trembling with indignation every time that an injustice is committed anywhere in the world, we are comrades, and that is more important.
Well said. Well said.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. So where can listeners find your organization on the web and you know stay up to date with the happenings of the Wisconsin chapter?
Yeah. So if you go to our website, you can actually sign up for our mailing list,
Okay.
which is an email mailing list, which we have our own little blog on there that we post stuff on, and we'll send out emails um, whenever we post something. And we're active on two platforms. That's one, our website, which we scored a great URL. It's john-brown-gun-club.org. So johnbrowngunclub.org, separated by dashes. And we're active on Facebook. We have a few more social medias, but we don't really use it. Because of my role as secretary, I do a lot of things. And unfortunately, I just can't find the time to be active on every single social media.
Ah,
So right now
sure.
it's just Facebook. Um, so if you search up Wisconsin John Brown Gun Club on Facebook pages, you should be able to find us.
All right. That's excellent. And I will have the links for all this stuff in the show notes. So once it's published, people can just click the link from the show notes, whether it's Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever they might listen, um,
Beautiful. Well,
and take you right there, or at least copy and paste if the link doesn't work,
yeah.
or I should say if it's not a hyperlink.
Yeah,
Depending on the platform, some of them don't hyperlink. So
I can understand that.
yeah. But all right, well, Lilith, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining me.
I truly appreciate being on here. Recently we have had an uptick of attention recently, and we're also planning to be on a docuseries soon.
Mm,
Um,
awesome.
so I'm really glad that we're getting the word out.
Excellent. That does it for the show. Thanks for listening. Voices from the Left is a presentation of the Anti-Capitalist Podcast Network. Special thanks to Nick Josephs for the use of the theme song. You can find Nick on Spotify or on the web at nickjosephs.com. Don't forget to rate and review on whichever platform you listen. If you'd like to support the show, you can subscribe at patreon.com/voicesfromtheleft or donate at buymeacoffee.com/voicesfromtheleft. All the links will be in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and solidarity.